Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lajarga Velazi, and coming up in today's newscast. Iran says it may step up efforts to enrich uranium. U.S. reiterates its support for a two-state solution. And Israel has vaccinated 4.5 million people against the coronavirus. The Israeli military reported sinking a suspicious naval vessel near the Gaza Strip shore on Monday. The IDF said the Gazan vessel approached a patrol boat, prompting troops to open fire and sink it. As of today, no one is reported to have been injured in the incident. Sources saying that the vessel was spotted off the coast of Khan Yunis and was tracked for a few minutes before being targeted. This is by no means the first instance of such incidents. Over the past few years, the Israeli Navy has thwarted several attempts by militants in the Gaza Strip to launch attacks against Israeli targets at sea. And currently, the Defense Ministry is working hard to establish a maritime barrier to put an end to such naval attacks. Israel is also said to be building a new anti-missile technology in collaboration with the U.S. The new ballistic missile shield, the Arrow 4, will act as yet another layer in the defensive system built with an eye towards Iran. The Arrow system, currently made up of the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 interceptor missiles, represents the longest range of Israel's air defense network, designed predominantly to shoot down ballistic and cruise missiles, including those that could be used to carry a nuclear warhead or other non-conventional munitions. Defense Minister Benny Gantz calling the partnership a technological and operational leap forward. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei said on Monday that while his country has no interest in a nuclear weapon, nobody, not even Israel, would be able to stop them. Khamenei wrote on his Twitter account that international Zionist clown has said they won't allow Iran to produce nuclear weapons. First of all, if we had any such intention, even those more powerful than him wouldn't be able to stop us. At the same time, Khamenei said that Iran may enrich uranium up to 60% purity to meet the country's needs and would not limit its enrichment to 20%, further challenging the 2015 nuclear deal which the current U.S. administration is seeking to re-enter.
طرف‌های مقابل این 4 کشور یعنی 3 کشور اروپایی و آمریکا اینها در این حرفایی که این روزها میزنن بیانیه‌ای که صادر کردن ادبیاتی که به کار بردن ادبیات مستکبرانه از موضوع بالا حرف زدن و طلبگارانه.
Last week, the Biden administration announced that it was willing to resume talks on the nuclear deal, which the Trump administration withdrew from, but only if Iran were to fully comply with the terms of the original deal, while Tehran is insisting Washington end its sanctions campaign against the country first. Despite the signals from Washington, Iran has so far not shown any indication it is willing to comply. Instead, Iran announced it would start limiting inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency beginning Tuesday, hailing the move as a significant achievement. IAEA head Rafael Grossi said that while the agreement means less access, the agency would still be able to retain the necessary degree of monitoring and verification work. The U.S. administration's willingness to return to the deal has Israel concerned, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been one of the most outspoken critics of the deal. Despite this, a number of senior Israeli officials from the defense establishment, as well as several politicians, have publicly expressed their support this week of a return to the 2015 deal. Regardless, there's still a long way to go until both sides agree to return to the negotiating table. As we've just heard, there have been numerous new developments the past few days with regards to Iran and its ambitions towards nuclear capabilities. The United States has signaled its willingness to revive the JCPOA nuclear deal to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's detriment. And here to discuss the latest developments is Mordechai Keidal, Middle East expert and lecturer at Bar-Ilan University. So the U.S. administration is shifting its position and signaling a willingness to resume negotiations with Iran. What do you make of this?
Well, this shows that the Americans are actually succumbing to the Iranian resilience to run for a bomb. And the Americans are like, as if they don't know that the Iranians are going to cheat on them again, as they did for many years. Israel proved a couple of years ago, after Israel stole the archive of the nuclear military program of the Iranians, Israel proved that they were cheating. And now, amazingly, some people in America think that Iranians are people who could be trusted.
Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has always been vehemently opposed to any deal with Iran. Should Israel be concerned about the latest developments?
Definitely. Not only Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, everyone who doesn't want to succumb to the Iranian hegemony here in this region should be very worried. Unfortunately, Iran succeeded to tame Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza Strip, and Iran wants to continue to spread its hegemony over other countries. And everyone who understands this development should oppose the Iranians in any possible way. For example, to continue with the sanctions on Iran, to continue to be out of any agreement with Iran. But unfortunately, there are some people in the American administration who don't get it yet.
And how do you think that the U.S.'s stance is likely to affect relations with Israel?
Look, the relations with Israel, between Israel and the United States are deeply rooted in history, in ideology, in the mindset of the two peoples and the two states. So this is something which is very basic. Unfortunately, we had some time of very deep American mistakes in the days of Obama. And apparently, what we see today is version number 2 of Obama time under the presidency of Biden, who was part of the policy of those days already.
And how will Israel likely respond should the parties revive the deal?
The deal should be deeply altered, changed, corrected, in order to make sure that Iran doesn't have or doesn't own any nuclear weapon, not within 10 years or 5 years, which were left, but forever. Nobody with the right mind would agree to get into anything with the Iranians only on a temporary basis, as the JCPOA is.
And yet it seems like we're moving in that direction, basically to revive the original deal. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, there are some people in America who think that this is a good way. I and many other Israelis and Arabs and people, in other countries as well, not only think, they know that the JCPOA is a failure from the beginning. Because the Iranians need another way of negotiation. Let me give you the way how to make sure that the Iranians never have any nuclear military program. A message should be sent by the American president to the leader of Iran, telling him in very precise way, listen, sir, your time is over and your game is over. We don't believe any one word which you say, and you have exactly 1 week from today to get rid of all your facilities in places number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the places should be dismantled totally and sent out to us, shipped out to us. If you fail to do it within 1 week, we are going to bomb you. We are going to flatten you with the earth. Iran will go back to the Stone Age. And read our lips. We mean what we say what we mean. And don't call us, we won't call you. And you have exactly a week from now. Only if Iran gets such a message and it considers it to be a credible threat, only then they will comply and they will agree to get rid of their military atomic bomb. And this is what we should have done. No negotiations, no nothing. And they are not suicidal. If they understand that Iran will be totally destroyed if they fail to do this within a week, only then you can achieve what you really want.
All right, well, Dr. Mordechai Kedar, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed United States support for a two-state solution with regards to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a call with Israeli Foreign Affairs Minister Gabi Ashkenazi on Monday night. In the call, Blinken emphasized the Biden administration's belief that the two-state solution is the best way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, living in peace alongside a viable and democratic Palestinian state, the State Department said in a statement. In a tweet following the call, Blinken wrote, "It was great speaking with Gabi Ashkenazi today to discuss our partnership, regional changes, and Israel's efforts to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. The United States remains unwavering in its commitment to Israel's security." The U.S. Secretary of State also addressed Israeli concerns of bias against Israel in international bodies, saying that the U.S. would continue to oppose unfair and one-sided actions against Israel in the multilateral arena. Despite his assurances, the U.S. under the Biden administration has rejoined the UN Human Rights Council, which former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew from in 2018. The international UN body has passed more resolutions against Israel than any other country in the world. Israel celebrating yet another vaccine milestone Tuesday morning, as nearly 4.5 million citizens get the jab against the coronavirus. But of course, there's still much more to be done. Aaron Porras reporting.
Israel's COVID vaccine campaign getting closer and closer to the goal. Health Minister Yuli Edelstein announcing over 70% of all Israelis over age 16 now having gotten at least the first dose of the drug Tuesday morning. That's 4.5 million people, or roughly 50% of the country's general population, and with a third of the population inoculated by both vaccine doses. Also, this includes the vast majority of at-risk populations like the elderly, medical staff, and now most of the IDF. Then, in keeping with earlier promises, surplus vaccine doses already going to the Palestinians in East Jerusalem who hold Israeli IDs and residency cards but live beyond the security barrier with the West Bank. Magen David Adom paramedics seen setting up a vaccine station at the Kalandia crossing where thousands cross each day. And this after similarly having started vaccinations for the 122,000 West Bank Palestinians who come to work in Israel daily as well. That said, authorities are still trying to stay grounded, the infection rate remaining at roughly 7%, with nearly 41,500 people actively sick, 800 of whom are in serious condition, and the death toll rising to 5,604. Edelstein, for his part, warning of a coming rise in infections as well due to expected rule violations over the coming holiday weekend. The health minister adding that the rules are written in blood, follow them. And the COVID cabinet, meanwhile, extending tighter border control regulations to keep more virus variants out. So starting next week, daily arrivals in Israel, for one, will be restricted to just 200 people, excluding certain humanitarian cases.
In addition to added border restrictions and heightened vaccinations, Israel is now looking to impose special Purim restrictions. Alyssa Hugel has the report.
Children eagerly waiting on long lines at newly reopened shops to purchase costumes, as Israelis gearing up for the upcoming Purim holiday. While there is much buzz in the air, there is also fear. Typical Purim celebrations include mass gatherings and parties. And all this causing health officials to worry that Purim will lead to another outbreak of coronavirus, similar to last year when the holiday gave way to the country's first mass surge of the disease. In order to prevent spikes in infections, the government is meeting Tuesday to discuss plans for a number of holiday restrictions. First, the health minister proposing that a night curfew be set from Thursday to Sunday between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. People will also be required to remain within 1,000 meters of their home. It comes as no surprise to say that this year the typical large gatherings and events will be banned, Israelis being required to celebrate only with their nuclear family. Meanwhile, the COVID cabinet also drafting a plan to return students in grades 7 through 10 to school after the Purim break. Prime Minister Netanyahu expressing urgency to return to class. The government planning on allowing students in green and yellow cities, as well as students whose families have been vaccinated, to return first.
The Israeli government has announced it will compensate Yemenite families whose children mysteriously vanished during the early years of the state. Opening up a painful chapter in history, the government on Monday approving reparations for mainly Yemenite families whose children vanished without trace from Israeli immigrant facilities in the 1950s. The government is set to grant each family between 150,000 and 200,000 shekels, that's approximately $46,000 to $62,000. Known as the Yemenite Children's Affair, over 1,000 babies went missing, often after they were taken to health clinics or hospitals. Families were then told that their babies had died but were never presented with any proof of their death. As such, many of these families have insisted that their babies were in fact abducted, only to be adopted by Jewish families in the United States. Over the years, 3 committees of inquiry looked into the tragic matter, but none were able to provide any answers, with some critics claiming the committees covered up the facts. While much of this tragic chapter in history still remains unknown, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also instructed the Education Ministry to include the story of the abducted children into school curricula. In a statement, Netanyahu said that while compensation cannot atone for the pain the families have suffered, he hopes the government decision will help them find some comfort. Now, with Israeli elections scheduled for exactly 1 month away, political parties have officially launched their campaigns and are not holding back. Here with an update on the political party scene as we head towards what looks to become an intense campaign season is Rabbi Dov Lippman, former member of Knesset for Yesh Atid Party and Secretary General of the Confederation of United Zionists. Welcome.
Great to be with you, Lidar.
So as we approach a new election cycle, who is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's biggest challenger?
He's trying to create the image that his biggest challenger is Yair Lapid, the chairman of the Yesh Atid Party, because he wants to very much create it as right-wing versus left-wing. So he can say, you must come out en masse to vote for Likud and for myself so that we can defeat the left-wing contender. But in reality, his real challenge comes from a combination of Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett from New Hope and Yamina, who are actually more to the right of Netanyahu and have said they do not want him to be prime minister, and they could have the potential to put together enough parties who don't want Netanyahu to come up with the 61 necessary to form a government and oust Netanyahu from the premiership.
Now, we've already seen the gloves come off, especially with regards to Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett attacking each other on the right, though they now appear to have reached some sort of truce. They are vying for the same votes and both trying to position themselves, as you mentioned, as the alternate to Netanyahu. So what should we expect to see there?
It's very interesting because you have these 3 parties, Yesh Atid with Yair Lapid, and then Gideon Sa'ar, Naftali Bennett. All of them want to be the next prime minister, and they're vying to have the second largest vote count after Likud, so that if this coalition develops of these parties who don't want Netanyahu, they could lead that camp. But they realized how much damage they were doing to one another by really slamming each other. And I do believe you're seeing them take a step back right now, and each of them are starting to talk about issues again as they try to bring together votes from this camp. But as you mentioned, this is a real challenge because it's a limited number of votes that are out there for these parties to get. And I do believe that both of them will have a significant challenge to grow at all. From where they are in the polls, New Hope and Gideon Sa'ar somewhere around 13 seats, Naftali Bennett somewhere around 10 seats. It's going to be very difficult for them to find a way to grow without trying to slam one another, because like you said, it is the same pool of votes.
Now, many of the leading party leaders, Gideon Sa'ar and Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid, have announced that they will refuse to sit in a coalition with Netanyahu at the head. Are these just empty campaign promises, in your opinion?
From Yair Lapid, it's definitely not, and I'm not saying that because I was a member of Yesh Atid. I'm no longer a member of the party, but he has showed, even in the last campaign, the last elections of blue and white, that he'll even let blue and white fall apart and not stay with Netanyahu. I happen to believe that Gideon Sa'ar would be in the same camp, with one exception. Gideon Sa'ar could, in theory, say, if Netanyahu is on a path towards 61, and that 61 includes the extreme right-wing group of these religious Zionists, which include students of Meir Kahane, in theory, Gideon Sa'ar could position it and say, I need to join a government in order to save the country from having a right-wing religious government. But as a person who started the party for really one purpose, and someone who has worked closely with Netanyahu in the past, I find it hard to believe that would happen. And I do believe he will stay steadfast in that promise, which is also why, Lidar, there is a possibility that when it's all said and done, we'll be talking again as we approach a 5th election.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that, though it certainly is a possibility. Now, what about Benny Gantz? We're seeing a petition from former IDF officers calling on him to resign from the race altogether. Polls showing he's barely over the threshold. Is this the end of the line for blue and white?
It definitely would seem to be the end of blue and white, regardless of what happens in this election. There was significant pressure on him to pull out and free up those three seats that are in his possession right now, according to the polls, and let them go to a Yesh Atid or to a Labor, one of the other parties towards the center left. He has said that he's staying in until the end. If, though, there is a significant decline in the polls, I do believe that at a certain point, he might say, I'd rather pull out than face the prospect of not crossing the threshold, and also those votes going to waste. So it'll be interesting over the next few weeks. That's the only dramatic change that I can really see taking place, in which a few votes will open up that will probably go more towards the center-left camp.
Rabbi Dov Littman, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. And I'm sure there will be many more political intrigues as the campaign season progresses.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We've just heard about how the election cycle is heating up, and now joining me in the studio is ILTV's Aaron Porras, who will dive deeper into the election campaigns on ILTV's Insider, which airs after the news. So Aaron, what can you tell us? First of all, who were your guests joining you in the studio this week?
All right, well, I had two guests, which is my usual. Today in Insider, we had Colonel in the Reserves Olivier Rafowitz, who was on the Israel Beitenu party list. Now he's a political and strategic analyst for them, senior political analyst. Then opposite him, I had Eli Chazan, who is the director of international relations with the Likud party. So two big names, definitely in the know on what's going on in their respective parties. Total, more or less opposite ends of the spectrum, not completely, obviously, but
definitely
pretty opposite,
political rivals.
We had some political rivalry, and you know what I love about the show is that even when it gets pretty heated, which it can sometimes, at the end of the day, and that's really something to be said about politics and political discourse in Israel, is that even when people get really angry with each other and get really heated, maybe even call each other names, at the end of the day, it calms down. They shake hands and smile and leave friends, which is really nice. So that's something that you're going to see a little bit on the show tonight.
And what were some of the topics you covered?
All right, well, so generally we were talking about the political campaigns heading into the fourth elections next month, and we covered everything from who the natural allies on the left and the right are. We covered some of the allegations against Netanyahu and the Likud party with respect to courting the Arab public and the Arab Joint List, and there was some difference of opinion on who should and should not be in the government, I suppose you could say.
All right, so can we get a sneak peek?
I think now is probably a really great time to go check it out, yeah.
All right, let's take a look.
What I'm telling you now, we are not against any citizen in Israel if he behave according to the rules and according to the laws. Like you, we are against terror and violence, but we are also against, not like you, anti-Zionist groups. And when you make coalition with people who don't give a shit of Israel, they don't like Israel, they don't want to serve in the army, and you are going to give them millions of dollars because you want them in your coalition, you make a big mistake for the future of Israel. You put Israel in very big danger. That's why today many Israelis are very, very unhappy about Mr. Netanyahu, because in order to keep in power, he's ready to make a deal with the devil. And the devil is not Zionist, he's not Jewish either, and he's a big danger. And you know that. You know it very well.
All right, great. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Lina.
And don't forget to tune in to Insider after the news. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Hannah Rifkin.
Thanks, Lidar. For tonight and tomorrow, we're looking at partly cloudy to clear skies, with lows this evening averaging at 48 degrees Fahrenheit or about 9 degrees Celsius. Then highs tomorrow are called to get to about 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius.
Thanks, Hannah. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. It's a terrible car accident on But all right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.26 shekels to the American dollar and 2.59 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Ladarga Velazi. Thank you so much for watching.